Good afternoon, Southern California. I'm John Baldwin with John Hart Real Estate, and today is January 6th, 2022. As you can see on your screen, this is a different format than we've done previously. Got a little bit of information. I got a PowerPoint presentation sent to me by one of my lenders. He's a great lender in the Woodland Hills area, and but this market forecast for 2022 is from Barry Habib, and Barry Habib is he's a data guy. He's very renowned for forecasting where the real estate market is going. He's won several crystal ball awards for his forecasts. So. Barry Habib puts out some good data. So I think this is a good thing to go over both for buyers and sellers, and kind of look at what do the experts think are going to happen in 2022. There's also a little bit of looking back at 2021 in this, and then this ties in really well with some of the last videos I've been doing, the rental video and the appreciation videos and the inventory videos that I've been doing. So I'm seeing a lot of things, but I did see a couple new things in this that I think are important and kind of help me understand some of the timing that I was seeing in the other videos with my, what I was talking about with that sweet spot of being potentially February, March, April, or March, April, May, right in there. So I think that's still potentially our sweet spot depending on when rate hikes happen and some behavior by the Fed. So let's get into it. All right, 2021 recap. The forecast was for rates to rise beginning of the year and then to come back down toward the fall. Actual rates did rise sharply at the beginning of the year, and then we kind of came back down pretty quickly toward late summer, and had pretty good rates going into the fall. So I think overall we all know 2021 interest rates were pretty good, with a little bit of fluctuation. Housing demand, the forecast, strong demand, tight supply would push home prices up by high single-digit percentage. Now, what we did see, and you go back to some of my previous videos, and you'll see that what we're looking at was more like over 11% in most of the LA area. If you go on my Instagram, I got some Zillow slides that kind of show different areas, and almost all of them show like a little over 11% appreciation in much of the San Fernando Valley and Southern California areas. So I think this is definitely a reflection of that. So I think this is I think everything I've been putting out is in line with this so far. All right, 2022, the Fed will play a major role. We already know that they're telegraphing 3 rate hikes. So, but let's talk about tapering. They're buying mortgage-backed securities, so they're going to be tapering their purchases of mortgage-backed securities, and then also see the second part of that, the balance sheet runoff. They're going to try to shrink their balance sheet and get some of these mortgage backs off of their books. The Fed has been buying everything for the last couple years because of COVID. So yeah, that's going to hit the stock markets. It's going to increase interest rates, and housing and jobs, obviously. So all right. Fed voting members rotate in each year. I think in 2021 they were just more concerned about keeping everybody in a house, fed, and doing whatever they can with what limited tools they had during a pandemic. So I think they're going to have to, now that inflation is becoming more of an obvious thing in energy costs, food costs. I mean, everything is up. Automobiles, everything. So fighting inflation is a main focus. Negative stock market reaction could cause Fed to lose resolve, because as interest rates come up and or inflation comes up, the stock market could have somewhat of a retraction as those either higher interest rates or higher inflation eat into their profits. So they may try to this is what this is saying, is that they may try to prop up the stock market, as part of what they're trying to do. I think their only job should be fighting inflation. I'm a little bit of an old school Milton Friedman sort of grow the money supply at a constant rate kind of person. So I don't like an active Fed. I wish they were a little more passive and do what, the Fed in like 1919, 1921 did, where they basically, there was a recession from 1919 to 1921 and they did nothing, and it basically went away. And, we had a boom economy in the 20s that we can get into the causes of the Great Depression later. But, the boom economy of the 20s was really quite something. So, all right, let's get into this. Fed should have hiked rates sooner. Yeah, I agree with that. I think they were thinking that a lot of this was just due to COVID and not the fact that they were printing money like it was their job. Now, the best way to explain why printing money is so inflationary and so bad is, like, let's just take some simple fractions. 1 out of 100. That 1 is a lot bigger when it's 1 out of 100 than if it's 1 out of 1,000. And that's what they're doing. They're increasing the denominator. When you print money, you're making that dollar, that 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000. Instead of being 1,000, you're now making it 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. So you're increasing that bottom number on that fraction and making each dollar worth less. So I am amazed that they haven't raised rates faster to get out ahead of it, but I think they were a little more fearful of the potential impact that COVID could have around the world, and we're thinking about different things than just a straight inflationary issue. History can help us forecast what the Fed's going to do. All right, so this is where they're going to jump into what the different Fed chairmen did. Now, I was born in 1977, so Arthur Burns was, obviously before my time. I've read about the 70s and stagflation and everything, so I think stagflation was where the economy wasn't growing, but they were printing money, so they were inflating the money supply, but the economy wasn't growing. So you're increasing that denominator, but you're not, there's no activity to suck up all that extra dollars. So that's what that stagflation was. So year over year, inflation ballooned from 7% in 1978 to 14% by the time he left in 1980. That's pretty big. Now, one of the things I've been reading about, and I've mentioned it in previous videos, is using the current calculation. We've got like 6 to 6.8% inflation. But if you use the way they did inflation back in the 70s, we're more likely at this 14% inflation. And I've seen someone say as high as 20% inflation. So I think, we got to look at it now. The way they do inflation, that's different. In the 70s, they included housing and energy and I believe food in the basket of goods that create the what they calculate inflation on. So they've taken, I know, housing and energy out of it, and I think that is why we're seeing numbers that say, only 6 to 6.8% instead of the higher 14 to 20% that we're seeing. Because we all know, especially if you're in Southern California, our gas is significantly more expensive than it was a year or 2 years ago. We're now paying, even at Costco, I was paying like $4.20 something a gallon for regular the other day. So we're we're a full dollar over what we were a year ago. So something to factor in. All right, let's keep going. Burns remained steadfast that inflation was transient. And the higher inflation caused mortgage rates to rise from 12 to 18%. So when you have that inflation, rates just kept going. It sort of in unison with that. Paul Volcker, I've read about this too. In the early 80s, he hiked the Fed funds rate from 11 to 20%. Now, what he was trying to do is trying to suck that inflation out of the economy. And he did a good job. Inflation dropped from 14% to under 5%, and then mortgages were able to drop back down. Now, my aunt and uncle, I believe in like 1981, I think they said their first mortgage was at something like 21%, some ungodly number. So, that was, how they were able to deal with the inflation of the late 70s was these high interest rates to kind of again suck out that inflation from the economy and bring things back down. So all right. S&P 500 sharply declined. Tighter monetary policy pushed the U.S. into recession in 82. But after the recession, the economy started growing like gangbusters, and we had the late 80s and through the 90s boom cycle. So yeah, and then we had Alan Greenspan, late 90s, inflation doubled. And this is where I think, they were so fearful of inflation in the late 90s because of what happened in the 70s and early 80s that they slammed on the brakes a little too aggressively and started what I like to refer to as the whack-a-mole policy. It's like, oh, we're seeing a bubble over here, whack it. And then we're seeing a bubble over here, now whack it. And they keep trying to tamp down these bubbles. And this is when you have an active Fed doing stuff that I think it creates a whack-a-mole situation instead of a more Milton Friedman type policy where you grow the monetary supply at a constant rate through time and don't play the whack-a-mole game. You don't get into the how can we tweak it, because when you start to think that you can outthink math and economics is when you start this we're smarter than math and basic economics, and I just think you have to not have that ego and don't think that you can outthink the math, because the math, something I say with physics is the physics is always right. It may not be the physics you think it is, but the physics is always right. And in this sense, it may not be the economics you think it is, but the economics is almost always right. So let's grow the money supply at a constant rate, I think would be the advisable way to do it. But we have people who are in this we need to do something mindset. And I think when we get into that we need to do something mindset, we start doing stuff without thinking about the initial impacts, the secondary impacts, the tertiary impacts, and anything down the line. So, and I think this is where we got into that whack-a-mole situation. So, yeah. Inflation responded, it dropped, mortgage rates dropped, and sparked a huge refi boom. Yep. But there were consequences. The S&P 500 fell, it dropped, and the U.S. entered recession. So the reason is, in order to soak up some of that inflation and tamp down the inflation, you unfortunately, I think it impacts growth, because in order to suck up that inflation and you pull it out of the system, you've got to do something. And it does, short-term impact on growth, but then if you come out of it right, you get the boom times. And yeah, so all right, now we're to Jerome Powell. 2021 inflation increased from 1.75 to 7%. Powell thought it was transitory. Now, I don't think this made any sense. Everybody I've talked to, when they was like, wait, how much money are they printing? I mean, they're just where is trillions of dollars? And again, when we go back to that, when you take a 1 out of 100 is a lot smaller than 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 10,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000. So when you start increasing that denominator, and that one becomes even smaller and smaller and smaller. So higher inflation causes mortgage interest rates to rise. We knew that. So by them, working to tamp down inflation right now, we're hoping that it'll keep interest rates down. Fed is currently tapering their purchases of mortgage bonds and treasuries. Done tapering in March, likely to begin hiking in May. Fed targeting 3 rate hikes in 2022 and 2 or 3 in 2023. Now that's new. I have not seen the 2 or 3 more rate hikes in 2023. It makes sense when you have this much money being printed. They want to get out ahead of any sort of inflation. So unfortunately, they're going to be doing what Greenspan did in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they're slamming on the brakes. But I think with this much printing, this may be a more targeted, less panicky rate increase, because we've been so low for so long. We've been at 0% Fed funds rate to 1% Fed funds rate for a while now. So yeah, definitely something to watch. Again, I'm not an economist. I'm just sort of, a realtor trying to interpret this. So, if I, say anything wrong, let me know. But I think my general consensus here, or general idea here, is in line with what these guys are saying. And I think all my videos going back are in line with this too. I think if the Fed can tame inflation, mortgage rates should drop, but maybe from higher levels. So, okay, let's see. All right, let's compare all of these. Yeah, so every time inflation jumped, mortgage rates jumped, and then they raised the Fed funds rate in response, and then inflation should drop. But we just got to see how that factors in. And then that last one, stocks expensive, economy slowing, recession question mark. That's the interesting one here. All right, wild cards. COVID plays a major influence. Yeah, we know COVID is the unknown variable that can throw a wrench into everything. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. And this is where I'm a little concerned, because it seems like the administration just thinks if we print and spend more money, we can get the economy going. But we printed and spent a ton of money over the last 2 years. And this is where we are right now, is where we're looking at, potentially massive inflation, and we've got to figure stuff out. So what happens when you increase the money supply? In the short term, stocks shoot through the roof, absolutely. And then mortgage rates would rise. Fed's job of corralling inflation would be more difficult. Yeah, if you print more money, you are by definition creating inflation, because you're keeping that one on top, but you're increasing that denominator massively. So I think that's the best way to look at it, is simple fractions. 1 out of 100 versus 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 10,000. That, becomes so much less. Yeah. All right. Run off of Fed's balance sheet. First step, Fed to stop purchasing new mortgage backs, hiking the Fed funds rate, and they're doing reinvestments. So this sounds like this is secondary mortgage market stuff. So they're still buying on the secondary mortgage market. So instead of being, they're going to taper off the purchasing of brand new mortgage backs, and they'll sit in the secondary market and act there. So we'll see. By staying in the secondary market, they're trying to keep the interest rates low, that's to prop up the real estate market, but also to prop up the overall economy. All right, I'm not an expert in the stock market, so talk to your stock people. But from what I can tell here, is they're looking at the stock market as pretty much overvalued, and a rate hike could cause some contractions. So yeah, that's interesting. And let's see, there's one more slide I think here. Yep, forecast 10% decline in major indices in 2022. It's like, roughly, when they have the tilde there, that's an approximately 10% decline, so that could be give or take a few points. But they're seeing the stock market kind of coming back down a little bit, because they're going to have to start raising rates and everything. So, all right, that definitely an interesting data point. Historically, we, as realtors, when we see the stock market drop in points on a single day, we like it, because we see all that money that would have gone into the stock market goes into mortgage-backed securities to help keep those rates down and maybe even drive them down. So we typically like it when we have a bad day on the stock market, but we're talking bad single day, not necessarily a bad, massive correction or anything like that. So again, I'm not an expert in the stock market, so you should talk to your stock and bond people and get some advice on that. Interest rate forecast. Now this is a little different than what I've been seeing. So I think this is very interesting. What I've been seeing is the talking of the Fed telegraphing 3 rate hikes, that multiple sources have said that by the end of 2022, they anticipate being at that 3.7, 3.75 rate. This, Barry Habib here is saying he expects to be at that 3.75 rate by mid-year, sort of summer. And then with Fed action, softer stock market, and slowing economic conditions, interest rates will head lower. So back down toward 3% in the second half of the year. That's interesting. This is the first time I've seen that sort of prediction like that. So definitely something we should be paying attention to, and very, very interesting. So, all right, let's see. So forecast rates to rise to 3.75 first half of the year, decline. Yeah, so we just went over that. And what else we got here? All right, strategically, this sets up a bias of less upfront fees because of a refinance opportunity ahead. Okay, I do like that. Housing forecast. Housing will remain strong in 2022, but not as strong as 2021. We talked about that in a couple videos back, where it was, yes, as prices go up and the cost of your mortgage goes up, your pool of buyers shrinks. So you're going to have a slightly smaller volume, but at higher dollar amounts. So that's in line with everything I've been saying. Supply will increase but remain tight labor, supply chain disruptions, semiconductor shortages. So yeah, the overall economy, if the overall economy has a major hiccup, that will impact housing. So I think that is something that we all know, but sometimes we got to spell out the kind of obvious things too. So keep an eye on the overall U.S. economy. If all of a sudden there's a major hiccup and people start losing their jobs left and right, if we see a massive amount of inventory hit the market, then we might see an issue there, or downward pressure. But what I like to look at, and I'll harp on this a lot, is what my broker calls the magic metric. We have like 2 months of inventory. And until we're over 6 months of inventory, it's not going to be a balanced market. And until we're 7, 8, 9 months of inventory, it's not going to be a buyer's market. So right now we're hovering around 2 months of inventory, and we've been that way and even lower for the last couple years. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. So yeah, I expect tight supply to be still the biggest issue we're facing. Rents will continue to rise. Yeah, look at my last video talking about rents. Rents across the country are going up, and if they expect them to remain increasing about 5%, this will get some people who are thinking of renting maybe to go, hey, it's going to pencil out better economically for me to buy, because I'll get the mortgage interest deduction, I'll be building equity for myself, and I'll have a physical asset that will appreciate with inflation too. So lots of things at play there. So yeah, forecast is mid to high single digit appreciation for 2022. So all the data I was looking at for last year was 11% or more. So double digit appreciation. I was not expecting it this year, but this is in line with what I've seen from other sources. NAR, National Association of Realtors, the Mortgage Bankers Association, and I think there were a couple others like CoreLogic. Anywhere from the lowest one was at like 3.1 or 3.2 all the way up to over 7, but there were 3 of them sitting right about that 5% mark. So I think that 5 to 8% mark would be very doable for 2022. So this is really interesting. If you'd like me to send this PowerPoint presentation to you so you can dig into it a little further, let me know. And would love to sit down with you, have a buyer consult or a seller consult, and let's talk about what these forecasts mean for you and how we can utilize this data to do a better job selling your home or helping you get into your dream home. So my name is John Baldwin with John Hart Real Estate, and let's get your house sold.